Hi, and welcome to AMSSM Presents How to Become a Peer Reviewer for an Academic Journal. I'm Emma York, a family medicine and sports medicine physician as well as researcher. In this presentation, myself and my colleagues Dr. Vomer and Dr. Dusty Narducci, who are also family medicine and sports medicine physicians as well as researchers, will be giving you a step-by-step how-to guide to become a peer reviewer and why this is an important part of medicine to be active in. We hope you find this presentation helpful. Let's start by identifying what is considered an academic journal. Academic journals have many other names. They're also known as scholarly journals, scientific journals, or peer-reviewed journals. No matter what name that they go by, they are considered periodicals that contain articles written by experts within a particular field of study. So you'll notice within medicine, many of our journals are specific to a particular specialty of medicine. Each of these journals contain articles that are more credible than articles from popular or trade journals, which are also known as magazines or other online sources, because they have gone through the most rigorous review process. This includes a review process for editing as well as acceptance for publication. Additionally, these articles have the most references or citations in comparison to other forms of articles. One of the objective metrics that we have to determine a journal's level of credibility is called impact factor. Impact factor is the average number of times articles from the journal published in the past 2 years have been cited in the Journal Citation Report. These reports are published annually, and they're used to compare journals within the same category. So within the field of medicine, you can compare journals that are publishing articles related to the same specialty of medicine. The higher the impact factor, the more highly ranked that journal is considered. The impact factor can be helpful if you are trying to identify journals that you are pursuing for publishing your own research, or if you're trying to identify journals that you may want to become a peer reviewer for. We've mentioned peer review already, but what does this process actually mean? Peer review is the process by which articles are submitted to a journal, and then the article is reviewed by experts within the field that the article pertains to. So for sports medicine, if an article related to sports medicine is submitted to a journal, then experts within the field of sports medicine will review that article. They are reviewing it to assess for validity, quality, and originality of the submitted article. They will also then be tasked with the job of reviewing the article to identify any areas that may need edits, and they will submit any of those concerns to the editor. Unfortunately, this is not a foolproof process because some articles still contain inaccuracies when they go for publication, and most articles that are rejected by one journal will go on to be published somewhere else. The role of a peer reviewer is a very important one. Peer reviewers are literally the gatekeepers for filtering out invalid or poor quality manuscripts. In order for our journals to maintain high quality publications, they rely on peer reviewers for both vetting as well as editing. There are a few different types of peer review. These include single anonymized, in which the author doesn't know the identity of the reviewer, double anonymized, in which the reviewer doesn't know the identity of the author, as well as the author not knowing the identity of the reviewer. There is open, in which the identity of the author and reviewer is known by all participants during or after the review process. And then there are a few other types, including transparent, where review reports are posted with the published article, where the reviewer can choose if they want to share their identity or not. And then collaborative, where 2 or more reviewers work together to submit a unified report. The role of the peer reviewer is different from the role of the editor. Reviewers are responsible for reviewing any article that is sent to them that is within their field of study or within their field of expertise. Reviewers can be selected by either the author, who wants those particular reviewers to review their article because they know that they are within their field of study, or they can be selected by the journal from the list of peer reviewers that work with the journal. And these reviewers are considered the engine of the peer review process because they have a large amount of legwork where they go through and review, assess, and notate their assessment of the articles that they are reviewing. Those assessments and edits, potential edits, are then submitted to the editor in the form of a report. If you're interested in becoming a peer reviewer, here are some general concepts that you should consider before signing up. First and foremost, you have to respond promptly to invitations for peer review. Each publication works on a specific timeline, and if you do not respond promptly, then the publication will just move on without you, and others will be doing the peer review instead of you. Number two, show integrity in the process. Journals rely on the peer review process in order to publish really high quality articles. So use integrity when you are reviewing so that when journals are published, that they contain articles that will move the field of medicine in the right evidence-based direction. These reviews are confidential, so do not release comments to the public based off of what you have been doing as a peer reviewer. Number four, consider what is your field of expertise. Most of the time, journals will just have you list your field of expertise. And so be honest when you are filling out this form or you are answering any questionnaires that the journal sends you to identify your areas of expertise. Number five, identify any conflicts of interest that you might have so that you remove yourself from reviewing articles where you may have a conflict of interest. And last but not least, number six, time commitment. Being a peer reviewer does take time because you have to have the time set aside to really give each article the appropriate amount of review. And so do not sign yourself up for more than what you can truly handle.
The peer review process can be broadly summarized into various steps. This is going to slightly differ between journals, but the first step in general is submitting the paper. The authors are going to choose where they want to submit their paper manuscript to, what journal. And then the second step is the editorial board is going to receive this manuscript and they're going to review it. And then it goes to the third step, which is the second review. And this is when the editor in chief is going to evaluate the manuscript briefly and decide whether or not this needs to go on to, further reviewing. And the fourth step is the assignment. So this is when the editor in chief says, yes, this fits our journal. I do want a little bit more of a pass through on this to see if it's, an appropriate fit and if we want to publish it. And they're going to assign associate editor or somebody similar. And then the fifth step is where the reviewers, you, hopefully, after this learning module, will be a peer reviewer. And usually 2 to 3 reviewers are going to be chosen based on someone's specialty, their expertise, things like that. And the abstract would then be sent by the editor to the peer reviewers. The sixth step in the peer review process is usually when the reviewers need to respond to the invitations that they receive from the editorial staff. And please check your email. They send them quickly and they want you to respond promptly. Usually there's a date on there saying when your entire review needs to be done, not when you need to respond by. So be aware of that. Sometimes there is, please respond this in a week, things like that. But take note, respond quickly, keep your reputation good, and then you'll get a lot of more of these. And then the seventh step is going to be reviewing the paper. And sometimes this can take multiple rounds of edits, which I'll talk more about. And then the eighth step is when the editorial board is going to evaluate the reviews. So if there's only minor revisions that are recommended, the reviewing process may be skipped and only the editor in chief or the associate editor is going to assess these minor revisions made by the author, and we go from there. And then the ninth step is going to be a decision is made. And this is whether the manuscript is accepted, rejected, or sent back for further revisions. And this is, again, based on the editor-in-chief, the associate editor, or whoever is involved from the editorial board, and then also the comments and the recommendations from the peer reviewers that were chosen. And the 10th step is going to be production. This is when the journal is published. As a peer reviewer, that first pass, that first read through of the manuscript that you receive, this is when you develop your initial impression of the paper itself and gather that sense of whether or not you're going to eventually accept or reject or where you want to see this go. Answer a few of the following. What is the main question being asked or answered? And is this relevant or interesting to your peers, to your colleagues, to the journal? And is the topic original? Does it have a good flow and a good writing style? Does the conclusion address the proposed question? Is there consistent evidence throughout the paper that's being demonstrated? Are the statements factual? Are the authors credible? Are the figures, the tables, the infographics, are they purposeful to this manuscript? This isn't where you need to get into the nitty gritty, but it's more about looking at it as a whole and kind of just answering as you read through that first time. Make record, and sometimes I just jot notes as I'm reading the summary, the goals, the approaches, the conclusions. What are some highlights there so I can go back later and maybe investigate a little bit further or make sure things are factual. Is the paper interesting? Is it important? Sometimes I write throughout, maybe this should be added, or maybe this should be taken out, or this doesn't fit. And then again, go back later, with a closer eye and investigate. Does the data support the conclusion? Is the manuscripts have any serious flaws, any really big ethical considerations that you need to talk to the editor about? The goal of the second pass or the read through, that is really where you want to be a little more specific. That's when you want to provide comments that are necessary about specific corrections, add any suggestions you might have, something that's going to overall improve this article, ensuring that it's presented adequately and that there's accuracy in the information that's being given. Make recommendations and suggestions either directly on the manuscript, or sometimes they have you do it through like a questionnaire, depending on whatever journal it is. Just be aware of that. Be very consistent when you're providing comments or suggestions. I use a very structured approach. I put the page number, and be careful, it's not necessarily the page that you're looking at. Make sure you look to see what is listed on the manuscript that you receive. And then I put the line, and then I also put from line 45 to 47. And sometimes I put the entire sentence that I'm referencing to, and then again, put what I would suggest changing. You can do color coded, different things, but make sure it's consistent. And sometimes you can divide it into like really important issues or major issues, right? Or minor issues. And that can really help the authors kind of prioritize what they need to edit first. And while reviewing, I also want you to consider whether or not there's a meaningful purpose throughout the manuscript, and if so, is this clear? And identify any factual errors and reference back to things. I do a little research during this time. I learned so much from being a peer reviewer, and this is really a good opportunity to go back and double check. That's what you're there for. So here's a more in-depth approach, the step-by-step of how to peer review a manuscript. So when you're looking at the title of the manuscript, does it reflect the purpose of the paper? Is it too boring that it doesn't make me want to take time out of my busy day to further, look into this manuscript? Or is it so out there that I don't even know what I'm getting myself into? And the abstract, does it provide a reasonable summary of the paper? Is it too lengthy? Is it too short? Basically 1 to 2 sentences, describing the purpose, a little bit about the results, and the conclusion is all you need. When you're reviewing the introduction, this really sets the purpose of the manuscript. So as you're reviewing the introduction, really ask yourself, does it summarize the current research known on the topic? Does it highlight our current knowledge gaps on the topic? Does it identify the target readership? And make sure that it outlines the goals and the novelty of the manuscript. In the materials and the methods section, it's very, very important that ethical standards are maintained. Make sure that there's safety and health of any subjects that might be involved. Make sure that's referenced in there. And the research should be replicable, repeatable, and robust. And also, is there mention of the consort statement or the champ checklist? Whatever standard guideline that might be required or might be used should be mentioned in this section. In the results section, ask yourself, is it clear, accurate? The data, is it presented in a way that the reader is going to understand what the authors found? And make sure to comment on the number of times it was replicated, the controls, the statistical analysis. Was it helpful? Is it just more confusing? Is there cherry picking? I can go on, but this is really, use your intuition and your knowledge from all the research you've read and decide whether or not these results are presented in a fashion that is going to be understandable to the reader and be purposeful. In the discussion, refer to the statistical analysis. It needs to look back at the results that were found and then give a point to it. Does it present trends observed? And does it explain the significance of the results? The critical analysis of the data collected. Is it critical? Is it not? Does it present the gathered information appropriately? Does it include the gaps, the inconsistencies? Does it suggest future research? That is so important. Every research we all the research we create or every manuscript that we write should stem into more learning, more teaching. So make sure that's addressed here. When you're assessing whether or not the images, graphs, or tables are appropriate for the manuscript, it must support the discussion and the conclusions. It must have a purpose for being there, not just because it looks cool. And it should be very clear that it has a title, it has a label, it has statistical notation, references if needed. And then when we move on to the conclusion, 1 to 3 paragraphs is really all you need, reflecting the aims of the manuscript and whether or not they were achieved. And in the references, it should be cited appropriately throughout the manuscript. And then again at the end, under the reference section, we really don't appreciate references that are older than 10 years old. The newer, the better sometimes, and make sure it's not all the same type of reference. And also number the references basically in the way that the journal wants you to. There's a lot of different ways, so it's really important as a peer reviewer to go and understand, okay, I'm reviewing for this journal today. This is how they want the references done. Is that being done by the author? And references, need to be, again, like appropriate. And if you feel that there should be a reference that wasn't included, it's your job as a peer reviewer to let the editor-in-chief and the editorial staff know that. So after you read through the full article, think about the following. What's the flow like? Is the manuscript well written? What can be communicated better? What was done well? Are there any grammatical corrections that need to be addressed? And overall, is the length and the content appropriate? Is it meeting the journal's requirements? Are the references numbered appropriately? Are there too many or not enough tables, graphs, and keywords? That is so crucial now because there's so many articles out there. We want to make sure that there are keywords associated. So do they accurately reflect the content of the manuscript?
Hi everyone, my name is Vomer. I will be discussing how to provide comments to the author, the editor, and also ways that you can get involved in the peer review process. First, when you're providing comments to the author, please comment on the flow, structure, and writing style of the paper. Keep in mind, as a peer reviewer, you are not to provide any comment on the submission decision of their scholarly work. As you are providing feedback on the paper, provide positive comments on what was done well and constructive feedback on the areas that need more improvement, such as statistics, infographic demonstration of their data, statistical design, etc. Next, in the summary to the author, you should provide an overall impression of their work, what the study highlighted, and indicate the significance and novelty of their work to our scientific field. Finally, close the comment to the author with a thank you for their time, effort, and energy that went into preparing the submission and also for the academic work. The next step in the editorial process is providing comments to the editor. These comments will not be seen by the author. Your first step in this process is summarizing your overall impression with the scholarly work, mentioning if the methods of the study are valid, and assessing if the data is clearly presented and analyzed in a scientific manner. This is very important to ensure that the conclusions that the author is stating inside of their work are truly supported by the data. The next step in this process is assessing, is this work truly a good fit for the journal's standards? That means, does it have a topic of interest that the journal covers, and does it contribute further knowledge to the scientific community? The last portion you should convey to the editor is, what are the major concerns of the study? If you identify major concerns within an article, these should be reported immediately to the editorial staff and editor. Examples of these are a conclusion that is contradicted by the statistical process and data presented in the work, the identification of plagiarism, and a methodology and experimental design that has insufficient data, unclear infographics, and contradictory data that contribute little or meaningless support to the study. Now we will talk about ways that you can get involved as a peer reviewer. A great way to get involved in the peer review process is to reach out to your colleagues that you know are peer reviewers for journals. Additionally, you can network with editors of journals at professional meetings, and you can also join specialty societies and organizations that work in the particular field and topic of your interest. Another way to get involved with journals is to directly contact the journal and inquire if they need peer reviewers. Additionally, some journals offer mentoring programs that you can become a part of to learn how to be a peer reviewer. Anytime you are a peer reviewer or in the publication process, you should always use your ORCID ID, which is a unique digital identifier for every researcher. There are other identifiers that are similar to ORCID, like Scopus Author Identifier, Microsoft Research Academic Search, Loop, Researcher ID, and Google Scholar. After you participate and gain experience in the peer review process, the opportunities that come down the road are becoming an associate editor, an editor-in-chief, participating in continued medical education, and participating in publication committees. The peer review process can be improved through the continuous education and engagement of professional society members with academic journals. This is important to improve our body of scientific knowledge and also ensure that the review process occurs within a timely fashion. Other beneficial things that can come from an improved peer review process is highlighting the work and time reviewers contribute to journals, improvement of education and training of the scientific process for physicians and trainees, and also a decrease in journal shopping. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video on the peer review process.